So the other day I released a video where I ranked Alfred Hitchcock and Cary Grant's complete filmography, every movie that they made together. I received some requests after that video to do the same video, but this time Alfred Hitchcock and James Stewart. So that's what today's video is going to be. I will be ranking every movie that James Stewart and Alfred Hitchcock did together. This month I've been talking about Alfred Hitchcock movies because he was born on August 13th, so the whole month has been devoted to Alfred Hitchcock. If you like this kind of movie talk, or if you like rankings or reviews or Blu-ray hauls, then definitely consider hitting that subscribe button. Just like Cary Grant, there were 4 movies that James Stewart starred in, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. The only difference between this list and the Cary Grant list is that I basically love all these movies on this list. In fact, it's a ranking that, yes, these movies definitely are ranked. Like, I can choose a favorite one, I can choose a least favorite one, but even at that, I like every entry that's on the list. But with that being said, coming in at number 4 is the 1956 remake for The Man Who Knew Too Much. If you aren't aware, Alfred Hitchcock actually made this film twice in his career. From what I understand, he was required to make one more picture for Paramount Pictures, and he decided to remake The Man Who Knew Too Much. As far as which one's better, the original or the remake, I do prefer the remake. So as a movie itself, this was James Stewart's and Alfred Hitchcock's third team up together. He had filmed this movie just after Rear Window and a little bit before Vertigo. So one day while traveling out in Morocco, James Stewart and Doris Day's character, they meet a sweet English couple, and they get to know them so well that they actually let them watch over their son for the day. Well, while they're watching over their son, James and Doris are out having a great time in the village, just kind of visiting the market, when suddenly a man that he has previously met comes to him practically on the verge of death. He has a knife in his back, he's about to die, but he gives James Stewart's character some information that is very important to know. I feel like I've kind of spoiled enough with that plot description. I mean, that is really the plot, and so I hope I'm not spoiling it, but I still recommend you guys watch it because it's a fun watch, and both Stewart and Day give great performances. Plus, there's an ending sequence that is very suspenseful that has to do with a song that is being played. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I do want to show some praise to Doris Day because she gives an amazing performance. I know, this video is really just focused on James Stewart and Alfred Hitchcock, but I gotta give her credit, especially that scene where James Stewart gives her a sedative. She is such an amazing actress in that scene. And also, if you've heard the song Que Sera, it's famous from this movie. It actually won the Oscar for Best Original Song because of this movie, so fun fact there. Coming in at number 3, I have Rope. Rope is the first movie that Alfred Hitchcock and James Stewart teamed up together for, and I actually read somewhere that James Stewart later regretted having this role because it just didn't really seem like something that matched him very well. And I can definitely see what he means by that. This performance of James Stewart's, it just feels different than any other performance he's given in the past or in the future. He's not nearly as eccentric as his characters usually are, and he's also a very kind of quiet, reserved person, and a very analytical and logical person. This is that movie that you've heard of from Hitchcock where it has the long takes. In fact, the entire movie is shot in 10 takes, I believe. It's done very well. Like, even when it is edited into a new scene, it's done in a very good transition. So for an example, a character will walk by the camera, and that's when you know, oh, okay, a new scene has started now. And so he doesn't just cut to a new scene, he's very strategic with how he cuts to the next scenes. This was mostly because they couldn't film more than 10 minutes at a time with the cameras they had in that time period. And so Alfred Hitchcock still wanted to be as strategic as he could to make it look and feel like it was all one continuous roll. So that within itself is a reason to praise the film. But the plot itself is also a reason to praise the film. It's about 2 men who get away with the murder of one of their classmates. But this is where Alfred Hitchcock's kind of dark sense of humor comes in. The same night that they murder him is actually a night where they're supposed to be celebrating the exact guy that they murdered. In fact, they murder him by strangling him with a rope. They put him in this casket type table. For lack of a better term, I'm just gonna say casket. It's not a casket though, I can't think of what it's called, but it's just a table where you can open it up and store like books in there and whatnot. It's a container of sorts, a container that can also be used as a table. They put him in that container and then set the table on that container and have the guests eat off of that table. It's completely dark, but it's completely Hitchcock's sense of humor. But the biggest thing that this movie has going for it is, like I already mentioned, the long takes and the strategic way of filming it, but also James Stewart's monologue at the end of the movie is so powerful, and I can't say what he says because it's kind of like spoiler territory. The whole movie, you're following him and the other guests as they're slowly kind of starting to catch on that there's definitely something wrong with this party. At number 2, I have Vertigo, which I would say is Hitchcock's most artsy film he's ever done, at least of the films that I've seen from him. There are so many things to love about Vertigo. For one, the score is very haunting, and it's a fitting score because the film itself is very haunting. It has an iconic opening intro where it shows the cast and the crew. It's filmed on a very colorful screen. You see a woman's eye, she's blinking, and that's when the title of Vertigo pops up. And it's almost like minor foreshadowing for James Stewart's nightmare sequence that you see later on in the film, which is also a very colorful and haunting nightmare sequence. And honestly, that nightmare sequence within itself is a reason to call this film a masterpiece, because that right there is probably my favorite piece from this film. But it's hard to say that because there are so many good scenes out of this movie. I don't really want to explain this one because I think it's best that if you haven't seen this movie, you just go into it blindly. But just know that you're in for a slower moving Hitchcock film, but man, a masterpiece. I've discussed with you guys a little bit about this, but Hitchcock seemed to be one of those directors that a lot of his movies are better on a rewatch. And I definitely think that Vertigo is worthy of that statement because I find that every single time I rewatch Vertigo, I like it more than the last time. It's a movie that's not only beautifully shot, but it also has great performances as always by James Stewart, and then Kim Novak is the leading lady in this one, and she also gives a really good performance. Plus, it's a classic Hitchcock. It's full of twists at every turn. I love Vertigo, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you watch it. But coming in at number 1, I've gotta go with Rear Window. Rear Window is a movie that I recently did a whole entire video on my channel for Hitchcock Month, where I gave a thorough, in-depth review of why I love this movie so much. Why it's not just a standard 10 out of 10 movie, but why it's actually an 11 out of 10 movie. Just because of how good it is. And so if you want a more in-depth review of why I love Rear Window, definitely make sure to check that video out on the channel. But if I have to put it into brief thoughts, which will be hard because there's a lot of things I love about this movie. The performances are amazing. James Stewart and Grace Kelly are my favorite couple of all the films that James Stewart has done with Hitchcock. And then on top of that, it's just a claustrophobic, suspenseful movie. The entire movie takes place in one neighborhood, mostly in James Stewart's apartment. However, you get a view of the neighborhood and everyone else who lives in the neighborhood. But it just opens up a lot of questions that you didn't even realize you might have about society. It makes you stop and wonder, geez, like what's happening in my neighbors' houses? Are they getting away with things such as murder and I have no idea that that's even happening behind my back? So it opens up a lot of questions like that. But not only does Stewart and Kelly give great performances, but Raymond Burr and Thelma Ritter give amazing performances as well. Thelma Ritter was someone I failed to acknowledge in my 11 out of 10 review for this film, and so I want to acknowledge her here. I think she did great in this movie. I haven't seen her in too many other movies, but I really like her performance in this one. Rear Window is a masterpiece, and if you haven't seen it, you definitely should watch it. I think that it is like Vertigo, where the first time you watch it, you'll probably appreciate it, you'll probably like it, but I guarantee you that on a rewatch, you will love it. There is my ranking of Alfred Hitchcock and James Stewart's team-ups. Let me know what your guys' rankings are of James Stewart and Alfred Hitchcock's filmography. I would love to hear it. Thank you so much for tuning in to another video. Have a great day.